Thanks for that, and thanks for the opportunity. Okay, I need. Right, so as Caleb said, I work on spiders. I'm an arachnologist. One thing I'm not is a photographer. So you'll see some spectacular photos in here. They're all taken by a friend of mine, Bryce McQuillan, who lives up in Rotorua and takes amazing photos. And then a few other people have taken some of these photos as well. So, first of all, let's get down to it. So I'm going to try and rush because I could talk about spiders all night. And we'll just talk about one group of spiders, the widow spiders. They're so-called widow spiders because when they were first observed in the US, they put them in a cage, the female built a nest, and then they put males in there and looked what happened. The male mated with the female, then ran off the web, got to the end, and then the female caught up to him and ate him. And they thought, they eat their mates, they're widows. What they didn't realise is if you actually did this in the natural environment, the male would just run off the web and escape. So males don't usually get eaten. The other thing that people know about widow spiders is they have this powerful venom, and it's a horrible venom. It's a neurotoxin. It causes extreme pain. It supposedly feels like having your skin ripped off, and it does all sorts of other weird things to your body. They're often invasive species, so there are several species around the world. There's the western black widow, there's the brown widow from West Shumas from Africa, there's the Australian redback, and they all invade very easily. They all live in arid environments, so they like the heat, they're like me. Anything between 23 degrees and 40 degrees is a nice temperature. And the other thing that you notice about them too, which you can see there, is that the males are much smaller than the females. They have this rather neat colour pattern. We have no idea why they have this bright redness. It can't really be a warning because if they bite you, you don't feel the pain for 30 minutes later. So that doesn't really work. And in New Zealand, we have two species. And they're the only two medically significant species of spider in New Zealand. So we have 2,000 species of spider in New Zealand, we estimate. Only two of them are medically significant, the Katipō and the redback. God, I've got more than 20 slides, and that was more than a minute on the first slide. Okay, Katipō is very significant. It's the only spider with a Māori name, and it means night stinger or night biter. It's the only New Zealand spider that's ever been on a postage stamp. It was first discovered in the 71 by Powell, who was an eye surgeon, a Welsh eye surgeon in New Zealand, also responsible for the start of our sewage in New Zealand as well, so we have a lot to thank him for. Unfortunately, he died of tuberculosis pretty much the year that the sewage system started in New Zealand. But he named Katipō, and he named it after the Maori name. Again, you can see the males, females and males. There's a big size difference again. They're under threat from invasive spiders. This is a South African spider called Steatota capensis, and this is invading their habitat, so it's under threat from that. It's under threat from dune modification. People are taking driftwood home. The pines are invading, ice plants are invading, marrams invading, all making it not a great place for them to live. So it's in decline as its official status, and it's a protected species. You need permits to work on them now. If you went and stole one from a beach and took it home, you get fines up to $200,000. So I got interested in them because we have two so-called species in New Zealand. We have the plain old Katipō, which has this blood red stripe on it, very unmistakable, and you have an all-black variety you get further up north. And someone thought they were separate species and had named them as such. Department of Conservation were interested in this because they wanted to know whether they had two different species to conserve. So me and some colleagues got together, and these are pictures of genitalia. If you're an arachnologist, you look at genitalia a lot, and I'll talk about genitalia a lot more as well, and I'm really glad there are no kids here. So you compare the genitalia between them and between the redbacks, and that's a Katipō there, and that's a redback there. And so they have different hairs on their abdomen. They all have the same type of hair on a Katipō, whereas a redback has different types of hair. So redbacks and Katipō are definitely different species. There are differences in the female internal genitalia. That's what that looks like there on the inside of them. That's the external female genitalia, kind of just looks like a hole, kind of like that one up there. And the male genitalia, which I'll talk more about later, pretty much looks the same. So there's no morphological difference between these so-called two species, and this is where I came into the story. Then we sequenced some of their DNA to see whether there was any difference. So LA is Lectrodectus arthritis, which is the so-called black one. LK is Lectrodectus Katipō, and this is what you call a phylogenetic tree. So we've extracted some DNA, we run an analysis, we compare it with the redback as what you call an outgroup for comparative purposes, and there's no structure in there at all. So they're all over the place. There's no evidence from morphology, no evidence from DNA, and we even interbreed them, no problem interbreeding them. So we just have one species in New Zealand, Lectrodectus Katipō. So that was great, that bit of research was done. And what we also discovered is that you only get the red ones south of that line, and you only get the black ones north of that line. So and then we did some other statistical analysis, and it turns out it's all got to do with mean annual temperature. So there's a direct correlation. We don't exactly know what the relationship is, but that's why they're black in one part of New Zealand and red in the other. So that's cool, but the disturbing thing about this tree, and I don't know if anyone noticed it, but there's an LA in there. So these are all Lectrodectus hasseltii, which is the redback. And there's a Katipō in amongst them. And so we went back to that specimen and we resequenced it, and we looked at the morphology, and we looked at the nuclear DNA, because this is based on mitochondrial DNA. And what we have there is evidence of interbreeding, and this is at a site just north of Brisbane. So this was a bit of a problem, because we knew in the lab that they could interbreed because they are very closely related, and we think that the relationship is about 1 to 200,000 years in terms of distance between the two species. So here we have a bit of a concern, and this started to get me interested in redbacks. So then, and there's the point where it happened, just there, a little reserve just north of Gisborne. And we also know from the lab that you can only mate redback males with Katipō females. It doesn't work the other way around. So it only works one way. And this is what the DNA supported as well. So this spider had, somewhere in its ancestry, it had a female redback, but it looked like a male Katipō. A female Katipō, sorry. And so the only way it could have happened was this way. So we know it happens in the lab, and now we know it actually happens in real life out there in nature, which is a concern, because this is a protected species which we could lose effectively through hybridization. So that wasn't great. So a little bit about the redback. They're found throughout Australia. They bite about, hundreds of people every year. Interestingly, before indoor privies happened, males got bitten a lot more than females, and that's simply because a male sits on a toilet, he invades the web a bit more than a female does. And so that's where he gets bitten, with that excruciating pain. First described in 1870, which is rather odd, because that's quite late in Australia. For a spider like this to be noticed very late on in the piece is rather strange. So there is a theory that they're invasive in Australia. Not invasive from somewhere else, but invasive from within Australia. So there's a population in Australia, and then they've spread throughout Australia with humans. And there's genetic evidence I've got that shows that as well. And they've invaded elsewhere. They're in Osaka, and they're here in New Zealand. They're in Central Otago since the 1980s, and since 1992 they're in New Plymouth. They don't care about the cold. So that's the other important thing about Lectrodectus. Everyone thinks that they're an arid species, but really what they need is the heat. So it can get as cold as it wants, but so long as it's hot enough for them to mature their egg sacs, then they're happy. Once the temperature goes below 15 degrees, their egg sacs stop developing, and they suspend. So this is already starting to become a bit of a sad story. There's the classic hourglass mark that all Lectrodectus species have, or all widow species have. There's the epigyne. So that's the opening to the female genitalia. That's where all the sperm goes in. And there's our map of New Zealand showing you where we find redbacks in New Zealand. Katipō, by the way, are found from Karatane all the way around down to Karamea. So they're a coastal species. They only live in sand dunes. That's the only place they live, north-facing sand dunes. So they're very restricted in their habitat. So we did some computer modelling to see habitats and climates where redbacks could establish in New Zealand. Probably not so easy to see from the back, but the basic idea, if you look there at all these orangey, reddy spots, is if you can grow grapes in New Zealand, you can grow redbacks. So they want nice, dry places with long, hot summers. That's what they want. They don't want to get their feet wet, and they want to have nice, long, hot summers. You'll notice Auckland there, and you'll go, hang on, feet wet? It rains all the time there. But Auckland's got these things called houses that spiders can hide underneath. And so it's still nice and hot for them, and it's dry. So Auckland is a major risk. So these are the places you find them, with the stars, and all the places you can grow grapes, including the spot where we know that there's interbreeding happening. That's where they can establish. So now we have a species of spider that's here in New Zealand, that's interbreeding with our endemic species, that can spread all around the country in all sorts of places, including a backyard near us. So that's not great. So let's focus in on another part of New Zealand, Central Otago. So this is what the model showed in terms of the distribution. So it was first found near Glendhu Bay in Wanaka in 1981. It's still there. I can go back and find it really easily. It's in Bannockburn, really easy to find near there. Alexandra, you know the clock on the hill? You walk up to that all the time beside the track. There's tons of them in there. People just wandering past have no idea. So they're all through Central Otago, and our modelling shows that they can move further in Central Otago, not just where we know. This is a concern because in Alexandra, in the Alexandra Basin just there, we have this species called Prodontria modesta, which is an endemic species of beetle only found in the Alexandra Basin. If you go to the redback webs on the clock tower by the hill, their webs are full of the carcasses of these. So when redbacks feed, they bite their prey, and then they put their mouth parts up to the holes, and they vomit digestive enzymes in, and then they suck it out, and then they vomit it back in, and then they suck it out, like a kid does with a juice carton if you let them. And so what you're left with in the end is this nice exoskeleton of an insect, because insects have exoskeletons, so you have all the evidence you need to tell what the thing's been eating. So we know that they're eating hundreds and thousands of these. This is a range-restricted species because it's only found there. So it is of conservation concern. Of more concern is this place here. There we are. Can you see it highlighted in red? So there's Cromwell there. Anyone know what that is?
Highland Speedway.
Yeah, Highland Speedway. And in this 81-hectare triangle of land, that is the only place that the Cromwell chafer is found. It's a beetle that was spread throughout Central Otago, and now it's restricted to this tiny reserve. And in this tiny reserve, that's what it looks like. It's not particularly scenic for us, but it's the only place that this beetle exists. And when we produced this paper saying, well, this is where it's going to be found, we predicted that this was smack bang in the area that you find it. And sure enough, a few years later, it started showing up. Redbacks started showing up in the reserve, and they were catching more of these endangered beetles than the entomologists that study them have probably seen in years. So they're munching their way through a critically endangered beetle in Central Otago. More reasons to be concerned. And if you're not into insects, I don't really understand you, but they also eat lizards as well. So this was a lizard caught in the same reserve. And Central Otago has at least 3 species of endemic lizard as well that like to sun themselves on rocks in nice sunny places. A great place to find redbacks. So another problem with them. So the other problem with redbacks is that they build these webs that are made of some of the strongest silk known. So if I took a 1 millimetre strand of redback silk, it could suspend my weight. So it's really amazing silk. And what they do is they build this scaffolding over the top, and they'll build it in a little hollow like a rabbit's burrow. There's a few of them in Central Otago. And then they have these threads coming down which they stick to the substrate, and then they put lots of droplets of glue on the bottom of them, and things like beetles and lizards walk along and bang into the threads, and then the thread becomes detached from the ground because it's loosely connected and it's elasticated, so it hauls them up, and it means that they're incapacitated, and the redback can come along and just wrap silk around it. That's why things like widow spiders in the US can take on scorpions that are 7 times their size. So in Australia, these things can eat small snakes. Anything they can catch in their web, they can eat. So they're munching their way through these species. And we can't get rid of them with insecticide, because what they also have is this kind of retreat at the top of their web, which is kind of like a diving bell. So if quarantine people have problems with them, because when they try and spray them, they're sitting in this little area of clean air, and they just wait for the spray to dissipate, and then they survive. And then the other problem with insecticide is you'll kill the things you're trying to protect. So we can't spray them. The other thing you can do to get rid of pests is you can bring in predators, or you can bring in parasitoids. So in Australia, there's a pompilid wasp that attacks them. There are several little insects that will attack their eggs as well and feed on them. But we can't bring those in because we have Katipō here, and that's really closely related, and that's naive. So that couldn't cope with these things if we brought them in as a biological control. So that's gone as well. So, you know, that could be the end of my talk, and we'd be really sad. Well, I'd be sad. Maybe if you don't like spiders, you just go, oh, whatever. But we potentially will lose this iconic species, this only species with a Maori name. We've got no way of protecting it, because these things will spread more and more and more. They'll invade Katipō's habitat. They'll eat all these endangered invertebrates in central Otago. They'll move to other places and eat Canterbury's endangered invertebrates, the endangered invertebrates that we find in Hawke's Bay and all the other wine-growing regions. And then there's that kind of human element. They'll spread to areas where humans are. People are going to encounter them. They're going to get bitten by them, and they'll be in immense pain, and they'll not really have a good day. So that's pretty crap. But there's hope. Right, so biology lesson. This is a male redback, or is it a Katipō? Can't tell, they're really hard to tell apart. So there's the male, that's the cephalothorax, that's the abdomen, it's got 4 legs coming off, and it's got these things at the front called pedipalps. So a spider's like that, legs, pedipalps. And at the end of the pedipalp is a super modified claw that's changed heaps over millions and millions of years. And now what this claw does is it becomes this sort of like a crazy hypodermic syringe. And so what the male will do is it produces a silken web called a sperm web. No guesses what he puts on the sperm web. And that comes from his underside and just there, and he plops that down, and then he takes his pedipalps and he sucks that up into his pedipalps, and then off he goes. He's ready to party. So pretty much all males, all they're interested in doing is finding females and mating with them. Some of them even stop feeding. So this is your take-home message. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is really, really filthy. The Andrew Garfield one and the, what's the other guy, Tom Holland one, they're fine because he charges the silk up. So presumably he does that in a back room where he squirts the silk out of near his bum hole, which is where spiders do squirt their silk from. Okay, so a male spider's got a pretty shitty life. It'll feed for a while, but then once it matures, it's going off to try and have sex. But it's trying to have sex with something that's much bigger and much more powerful in it, that specialises in killing things the same size as the male and feeding on them. So he's got to convince the male that he's not its next food. And there's all sorts of ways they do it. These wolf spiders here, this male is drummed on the ground and then drummed on the female's head to say, hey, chill out, let me mate with you. And there he is, he's doing this sort of ultimate reach around and putting the sperm in the female. Then we have crab spiders. The male ties the female down with silk and mates with them. And then we have these other ones here, these Argiope's, big all-web spiders. There's the tiny male there. He's just so small, he just sort of cruises in and mates with her without her even realising it. So, the redbacks, they have this massive size difference here. And here's a nice example. This is a female here, and that's the male there. So the male, to get to this point, has gone onto the female's web and has drummed on the web and does that. Like, it's weird to watch. It's like she's a robot. He's a robot. And he drums on the web, and the female just chills right out and just stops moving if she's happy enough with him. And then he goes up and climbs on her like that. And this is super scary because she's a stone cold killer. And I got in trouble on national TV because I said it's like I'm my size and my wife's the size of a rhinoceros. And my wife's sitting up the back there. But what I said when they were asking me about this, I said, but that's actually not the case. It's more like my wife's normal size and I'm a kitten in terms of size. But they cut that bit and then they put that on national TV, and all my friends texted me and said, haha, you called your wife a rhinoceros on national television. So, a male has calmed the female down, has climbed on here. Now we've got a video. Hope this is going to work. Right, so there's the male, there's the female. She's alive. She's just really chilled out. There's the male there. You can see him there. That's his abdomen at the back, and he's got his pedipalp in the hole that looks like that, and he's pumping sperm in there, and then he does this, spider porn. He flips his abdomen round and puts it right in her mouth parts. This is just what redbacks do. Katipō doesn't do this. The first time he does this, he constricts his abdomen. She's trying to feed on him, but he's got muscles in his abdomen to constrict them, and he kind of avoids being killed. But he's got 2 pedipalps, she's got 2 holes that look like that. He's a male, he's got to have another go. He's done one hole, he's got to do the other hole. When he puts his second pedipalp in, she grabs hold of him and eats him, and he's dead. So what we have is a species that's limited by males. If only we could get rid of these males, we might be able to control the species. Because it's not like other males can step up to the plate, because they're only going to have one go each as well, and then they're gone. So the hope comes in that, and this is where the vomit bit comes in. So we've done widows, we've done somersault, we've done suicide. So the female, to attract these males, because these males are pretty much blind, they can't see very much, like light and dark, like we could see with a pillowcase over our head. They're doing it all by vibrations and by pheromones. The female coats, only virgin females, coat their web in a substance that then breaks down to become butyric acid. And butyric acid is what makes Parmesan cheese smell like it does. It makes ginkgo berries smell like they do, and it makes vomit smell like it do. So it's kind of the smell of vomit that brings the males in. And I have a student who did some work recently with these choice chambers here, and we had an actual female web, and we had this compound that we'd identified through chemistry, and the males can't make up their mind. Either or is acceptable. So that's our hope. Our hope now, this is the next stage, is to develop a chemical and test it out there in the wild, see if we can bring the males in and kill the males, and then maybe we can limit the population. So that's what we're going to try and do in Central Otago next. So the story doesn't really have that sad an ending yet. So we'll see where we're going. That'll do.
Questions? So going back to the use of and
Yep.
the effects of temperature. You mentioned that there's a clear divide in terms of climate and temperature, and that they're limited with the climate insects and
Yeah.
So if the climate does warm, do you reckon that will increase the metaphors numbers by being more favorable for breeding, or will it force will it depend on the urbanization, or will it not have those favorable to redbacks?
Yeah, so the climate, in short, climate warming will be really bad because they can still only live in that little those foredunes, those north-facing foredunes. That's the only place that's warm and dry enough for them. So Katipō might do better, but Steatota, which is a South African thing which breeds all year round and can come from everywhere. If you open your water meter cover, you'll have one sitting under there, sure as eggs, with some eggs. So they can invade, and they breed all year round, so they can invade. The redbacks will then probably have more places that they can establish. They'll invade, come in contact with Katipō, so global warming is not our friend in terms of Katipō.
Just about the mating behavior, really. Are the females picky at all, or do they accept any male that just drums at their weapon?
So female choice happens at the drumming stage. So there'll be males that will try it on, and she'll try and attack them or shoo them away.
Oh, okay.
And so this is probably the reason that Katipō males can't breed with redback males, is because Katipō males are bigger than redback males, even though redback females are bigger than Katipō males, so the size difference isn't as marked. And because they're heavier on the web, once they walk onto the web, the female goes, "Oh, you feel too heavy, you're prey," and just nails them. So it doesn't work all the time. They really have to try. Yeah. And she's got to be a virgin. If she's not a virgin, she's not interested, because they store sperm, and they can store sperm for over the winter, a couple of years or whatever. So yeah, once they've had their fill, they're like, "I'm shutting up shop. I'm just a killing egg laying machine." And they can lay about 200 eggs per egg sac, and they lay about 5 to 10 per year, and they have nothing. There's this thing called inbreeding depression, which, you know, which is why you don't mate with your cousins and sisters. Tell that to the royal family. And so that doesn't affect them. They can interbreed with brothers and sisters, and they survive. So they're really, really excellent at invading habitats.
You were talking about ways to wipe out the redback.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard of the genetic loss that they have male offspring.
Yeah.
With something like that, but they only have female offspring with.
You could try that, but
Sometimes.
yeah, but gene drives and all that sort of stuff is really hard to get
Yeah.
past all the people out there that worry about that sort of thing. Something like this is a clear-cut way of doing it. It's
Yeah.
a lot simpler
Yeah.
to gain acceptance for, I'd say.
Last one.
Hi. So you just mentioned that they lay about 200 years old, right? So what causes attrition in the population? So what just stops all those babies from having
They eat each other. Yeah. So if you have a whole bunch of eggs, the males and females will eat each other, and you probably end up like 10 or 20 or so really big fat ones that have eaten their brothers and sisters that are the biggest, strongest ones.
so it's not so much outside predation, but just
Yeah, yeah.
We'll probably stop there, but please ask him more questions in the break. You all just join me again.